Claymore is to eventually clay less. The application of the medium begins as a void, onto which is appended the wireframe skeleton, then the clay flesh, a substrate of sorts to catalyze a beginning from which there was none. From ragged excess can then be shorn to refined excellence, should the artist possess the wisdom and skill. Anyway, this is part 1 of the classic 2007 anime series based on Norihiro Yagi's dark fantasy manga Claymore. I'll be making 4 videos in total for this series, so if you like this one, peel your eyes upon the frivolity of my future dumb videos. This freak painted the forest crimson with the blood of its prey, but is interrupted by a cool sword lady. Later, some town plebs are startled to find their fellow man eviscerated upon the sidewalk. This makes 6 victims now, undoubtedly signaling the presence of a monster living amongst them, called a Yoma. As Yoma possess the ability to appear human, the townies' meeting diverges into fearful hysterics. This man is afeared for his guts, but the wrinkly elder seizes control over the room, suggesting that they hire a Claymore to be rid of the issue. Everyone is shook, but there remains no other choice. The dreaded half-human, half-yoma mercenaries have a special ability to sense Yoma, giving them the edge needed to root out the evil plaguing their town. This little fella named Raki gets the gist of the meeting from his brother, who elucidates on the concept of Claymores further. Suddenly, the Claymore arrives, attracting a crowd with her frightening presence. It's a lady, much to little man's shock. All Claymores are women, sometimes called silver-eyed witches. Only monsters can kill monsters, mutters the crowd. The elder whips out his enormous sack in front of the warrior, but the Claymore is just here to kill, and states coldly that someone will come along to collect after the job is done. She continues, callously foreshadowing that in some form or another, either her corpse or the Yoma's will appear shortly, and her departure causes the elder to collapse from the immense pressure. Riki Tiki sneaks up on the Claymore in the streets and is almost decapitated. Strangely, he shows minimal fear and immediately bombards her with questions, most of which are apathetically deflected. She is startled to find that the boy isn't frightened of her, and their walk through town extends until evening. Only one location remains unpatrolled, the mine just outside the gates. Seeing as this is the case, the mercenary decides to take a nap, inciting her follower to do the same. She questions his motive for expressing interest, but Ricciardi's parents were the first to be slain. Only he and his brother survived the attack, traumatizing him thoroughly. Seeing a powerful lady gave him hope in avenging his parents' deaths. The Claymore states that her situation is entirely removed from the concept of saving people though. Like a vending machine, her only purpose is to serve her organization faithfully, till her inevitable and gruesome death. Raki expresses his understanding of her predicament, but despite this, treats the Claymore as a human, promising to cook her a meal and asking for her name. She declines to answer, sternly suggesting that he will only forget in time. Anyway, back at the boy's temporary housing, everyone lies slain. Unfortunately, the Yoma was Raki's Nissan, who had yoinked the brother's brains and body while Raccoon wasn't looking. This is also quite traumatizing. The Yoma states its disappointment that the town hired a Claymore, and expresses its desire to have a light snack before piecing out. A single tear sneaks its way out from the soul of Raki's brother, causing Raki to tremble with rage and attack. His attempt is unsuccessful, and he's lifted by the gourd. Raki remains stalwart in his assault, but is interrupted by the Claymore, who had smelt Yoma on the boy and followed him home. Her eyes glow a bright gold in the presence of the Yoma as she methodically dismembers it. Her battle-hardened half-Yoma aura startles Raki, who was already quite startled to begin with, and she slowly plods away, leaving little man behind to wallow in his rapidly declining mental state. Sometime later, Raki was cast out of the village due to pseudo-scientific suspicions that he may turn into a Yoma, and currently struggles through a dust storm. Luckily, a nondescript Claymore brings him to safety. After sleeping for a whole day, some guy catches him up on the events while he was unconscious, pointing out that a silver-eyed witch paid his fare for the inn. Raki immediately recalls his encounter with the Claymore and runs off to catch up to his savior, finding that he is unfortunately just a small lad with little legs. By a second stroke of luck, a wandering village pleb identifies Raki and tells him the location of the Claymore. He was actually waiting for him outside of town. He gets going, discovering his rescuer, who very suspiciously calls herself a Claymore, and begins to unceremoniously flirt with Raki. Her rizzle fizzles. He calls her out on this, and is promptly used as bait to lure out the real Claymore, who is once again following Raki. The Yoma switches tactics, using the boy as a hostage. The Claymore insists that this method is ineffective against her kind, but the Yoda begs to differ after seeing her tenderly care for Raki, citing the fact that Claymores still contain memories of being human. The Claymore is silent, then yeets her blade into the forest. This satisfies the Yomer, who is actually shocked that she would do that. The Claymore is run through, uses the opportunity to ensnare the Yoma, stylistically backflips off a cliff, rolls down said cliff, re-equips her massive swanger, then executes her foe, after which she casually plucks out the Yoma's arm and regenerates via aggressive throbbing. Raki is conflicted and believes that he was an active hindrance to the slaying, but the Claymore insists that her method was the most effective for achieving victory. Raki counters by thanking her for going out of her way to save him. He proceeds to thank her for everything else, and swears that his memory of her will remain for as long as he lives. Before he is able to depart, the Claymore asks whether he was banished from his town, then has a visceral flashback to her own similar past. Raki is interrupted from his crisis by the Claymore's offer to follow her as her personal chef. Raki is elated and asks for her name. She responds with Clare, and they depart beyond a clearing of trees. 2 Yomas are felled by Clare the Claymore, much to the shock of the villagers. The third buds wings, causing Clare to throb once more, transforming into anti-aircraft mode and exploding the sauce out of the flying type. Job's done. Upon departing from the scene, Raki inquires about funds for the trip, which leads to further questions about the mysterious organization. Kale doesn't produce any new information regarding this, other than the fact that she was turned into a Claymore as a child. Later, Raki has the hungries, so Clare toasts a lizard for him to consume. Even more later, it is turned into quite a lavish meal for those on the road, and Raki celebrates this victory. Strangely, however, Clare only sustains herself off several small bites. Rat King, of course, inquires, unveiling that this is another peculiar biological aspect of Claymores. Despite this, Clare declares a mild envy of Raki's zealous gluttony. This causes him to emit a barrage of questions, which are quickly deflected by Clare caressing her massive sword. He continues, though, asking about the emblem on her blade. It is a unique symbol given to each Claymore, which represents their name and distinguishes them from each other. Suddenly, she wanders into the woods to pee. Never mind. The neighborhood watch requests a private meeting. He teases her for superimposing her past on Ricky Tricky, but Clayle gets to the business at hand and begins to change clothes. The great titty detective begins his analysis, discovering traces of Claire's abdominal wound. He reminds her to be careful about taking damage. Despite Claymore's having regenerative abilities, receiving an injury in a critical location could kill them instantly. Before departing, her handler tosses a sinister rectangle at her. It is a black card containing another Claymore's emblem. Upon returning to the camp, Rimkey is able to identify that Caper is troubled and approaches, only to be deflected. That night, Claire reminisces about touching hands with her sad twin in a nostalgic green cave. She looks wistfully at her hand, and this tower begins to scream ominously. The next day, probably, the pair stroll through another village. This time, there is no Yoma infestation, as keenly observed by the local plebs. Claire drops Raki off at an inn while she goes to take care of business, reassuring the normies that there is no Yoma present. This makes the innkeep more nervous, and he spills the beans on a location of another Claymore who passed through. To Mount Shrine, she departs, giving the cloaked stranger from before an opportunity to emerge from the shadows to elucidate Little Man on the nature of the Claymore's origination, confirming for Raki that Claire was once human. However, his ideations are halted by the revelation that Claymores use their human mind as a tool to restrain the Yoma powers within them. If there is humanity therein, it is, by necessity, being repressed to a certain extent. In addition, and unfortunately for the ladies, the creation of Claymores comes with a devastating flaw. They're all doomed to become Yoma. Ropey is shook. The more they use their Yoma powers, the quicker their Yomatic end will arrive. Raki is twice shook. He runs off to search for his girl, who is currently reminiscing about the homie of old. Raki catches up and immediately regurgitates what he just heard. Claire calmly states that she hasn't begun to transform or anything so dire, but implies that another Claymore has. It is her current quest, via sinister rectangle, to slay one of her kind. Each Claymore must undergo this metamorphosis as part of their natural life cycle, and so when the time time comes, they usually try to hold out until they can die as humanly as possible, sending out a black card to the Claymore they wish to be ended by. Tragically, Claire's target is a girl who underwent the conversion alongside her, a homie which shared what little human comforts they were given as they painfully mutated into half-yoma. It is time, and Elena greets Clare. Elena briefly reminisces about the horrific trauma as if it were actually a nice time, states that her hope was to become stronger by using the Yoma's power, throbs menacingly, regrettably utters that she should have strengthened her heart, then requests to be killed while she still has that human heart. Raki attempts to intervene, but it's not like Clare has any other choice. What is she gonna do, let a homie down and let a Yoma free? I think not. As sad as this is simply the fate of all who become Claymores, living and deceased. Raki quivers with sorrow as Clare articulates an impromptu obituary for her only friend. This causes her follower to question why she even wanted to become a Claymore. It is quite simple, really, to slay Yoma. A man of the cloth has perished. These fellas decide that they must call in a Claymore, despite their laws saying the half-yoma beasts are illegal. Clare is called to the holy city of Rabona under the special request to infiltrate unnoticed. Her handler proffers a collection of rabbit poops that will temporarily cancel out her Yoma powers, hopefully allowing her to enter the city without suspicion. Unfortunately, this also means that she won't be able to sense her target or use her powers while undercover. Sometime later, Rako and Claritis enter and secure lodgings. After doing so, Clare begins to feel the lethargy of being human, but pushes through to begin investigating. They enter into a sprawling cathedral, infiltrating under the guise of baptismal candidates, finding a gross dead guy, and Father Vincent, the client. He quickly baptizes Clare, who recites the secret phrase to indicate her identity. After recovering from the revelation, Vincesnut gives further instruction to rendezvous later. Back at the inn, Clare informs the keep of their cover as antique merchants, while Raki suffers through the pangs of overeating. Anyway, Crepe does a magical quick change into stealth garb and yeets into the night. She skillfully hooks her way to the meeting location and gets the scoop on the serial killings, making sure to inform the priest of her end of the request. Additionally, since the upcoming battle will proceed without her Yoma powers present, she petitions that Raki be taken care of in the event of her gruesome death. Father Vincent is swayed by her selflessness, despite her being a filthy illegal, and Clare departs. Immediately after, she is attacked by the Night Watch, who are deftly evaded and thus incredibly confused. The Yoma is here. And it's an enormous veiny one, too. The next day, Raki awakens to find Clare looking like a silver witch. Just as she is about to take her meds, the police enter, explain how there was another killing in the cathedral, and toss Clare's hood aside. She must have already had a bean, because her eyeballs are regular now. The officer covers up his mistake by engaging in some casual sexual harassment, which causes Raki to begin biting. He froths with rage, spewing lovely words about Clare to defend her honor. The other officer, Galk, thankfully has morals, and ushers the rest of the police out before further violence occurs. Clare makes sure to lecture Raki not to place so much faith in her compassion, as she fears his expectations will be betrayed eventually. Raki doesn't seem to understand though. Back at the cathedral, Clate takes in the information on the latest attack and notifies the client that this city's Yoma is an advanced variant called a voracious eater. They are wiser and more deceptive than their counterparts, thus significantly trickier to slay. As this is the case, Clare requests additional intelligence, inquiring about all who entered and stayed overnight in the cathedral. While walking through the hallway of tombs, she suspiciously thinks to herself that she must be missing some important clue. That night, Clare begins snooping once more, attracting the attention of the police again. This time, she's intent on fighting them, and they begin to duel. Her prowess with a blade is unparalleled, as she defends seamlessly against their joint effort attack. As expected, screams echo through the city, and she darts towards the source, slipping inside the cathedral unnoticed. Despite having no ability to sense Yoma at the moment, the air is thick with their vibe, and floor thick with blood. Another victim, and a stealth attack. Clare is only scratched, but her foe remains quick. Suddenly, the Night Watch arrives, throwing a knife into her plans. The Yoma strikes at the police, however, Clare intervenes with her bod, taking a devastating blow. She kind of lays there for a bit. The Yoma decides now is the time to strike once more and attacks. Claire says no again with a calculated dagger toss, causing her foe to maneuver into the shadows. She kicks a pleb to safety and informs them multiple times to GTFO or die. This wise order is disobeyed, and as a result, she is run through by the Yoma's spiky fingers. It seems quite pleased with itself and begins to aggressively waddle towards the police. An entire battalion of soldiers arrive, spooking the Yoma away, however. Fortunately, Claire hasn't been killed, and Galk scoops her up to ambulance her to a medic. Later, she is veritably messed up, and the doctors are confused by her anatomy. Raki is distraught by this whole event, and punches the corrupt cop for dissing his girl while she is down. This sours the mood for everyone, but the good Chalk recovers it by exclaiming that they must have heart for the battles ahead. Raki faithfully stays by Claire until she awakens a couple days later. Seeing as things have gotten quite dire, and Claire's cover has already been blown, Father Vincent holds a meeting of the priests to have his hired Claymore thoroughly sniff them. The clergy are wily and get the pointy sticks in response. There is no place for trivial bickering when lives are on the line, and Claire begins to suss out each of the priests. As she does so, the OG police discuss her battle plan to grapple the Yoma, then to get run through by several spears at once. I guess this is a plan, but she's already done that kind of thing before, and it didn't really go altogether smoothly. Weirdly enough, none of the people she sniffed so far were Yoma. As inevitable as the heat death of the universe, Raki finds himself chilling out with a gross dead guy from earlier. The bishop isn't Yoma either. She is shook. It must be Father Vin Pants. It isn't him. She is shook. Everyone is shook. It's definitely that dead guy keeping Richard company. Anyway, Claire figures it out just in time to save her nugget from pulverization, and so the battle commences. Raki must seem especially delicious, and is heavily focused by the voracious Yoma. But luckily, the police also arrive just in time to save Raki from pulverization, impertinently stating that Claire isn't capable of protecting Jack's diddle squats at the moment. Thankfully, the soldiers seem at least more prepared this time, and provide decent assistance for a few seconds. Claire's pathetic knife isn't enough to penetrate the Yoma's fleshy membrane, so Raki breaks from the back line and tosses her their statue. It contained Claire's big swanger all along, which gives her the moveset she's most used to. After a brief clash, she takes an arm. Despite this success, her wounds from the other day are weighing heavily on her vitality, and the Yoma begins to taunt her for only inflicting a flesh wound. As she used most of her energy to achieve that, Claire finds herself unable to dodge its malevolent fingers. She is saved by the police force, if only for a brief moment. Galk states that she is the only person capable of defeating this voracious eater, and begs her to find the strength to stand. Malicious knife guy is run through, serving as a distraction for his homie, who uses his body to pin the Yoma's dastardly fingies in place. His sacrifice allows Claire to try once more at decapitation, which doesn't hash out quite right again. Limbless as it may be, the Yoma still remains motivated, and impales itself on Clate's blade, using the same tactic as the Chicago police force to go for the big move. Luckily, the pills wear off at an opportune time, and Claire lands the killing blow. However, I think all the stress that she has been putting on herself mentally and physically has placed her not only in mortal danger, but also in self-concept imperilment. She throbs aggressively, unable to transform back into human form, and so takes up her blade with the intent to stop herself from metamorphosing. While she holds the consciousness of a human, she must die, but is using every effort to cease the Yoma flow, and calls the big guy to lop her top. She goes into an extensive dialogue to explain why this is happening, but Raki makes a series of concerned faces and latches on to his girl. She throbs harder as Raki thanks her from the bottom of his heart. His obituary goes on for a while, and he decides that he wants to die alongside her. Before this can happen, however, Claire explodes, making a complete recovery. She is shook. I guess Raki must have used some special human no-jutsu to stop the metamorphosis. The police are thankful to Raki for saving her from the transformation, and they hug it out. Just Raki and Claire, not the police. Sometime later, upon Claude's departure, Father Vincent and the Knights thank her for saving the town. Venison states how he completed the paperwork for employing Raki, but the boy ardently desires to remain with his sword lady. As such is the case, Galp bequeaths upon him a blade, small officer, words of encouragement, and the unlikely duo set off into the distance. This Yoma gets whacked by a buff lady. The villagers are thankful and get further spooked by the Claymore's morbid description of towns who don't pay properly. Her handler, Orsay, scolds her for those concealed threats and reminds her to just stick to killing Yoma. He then politely describes to the audience that she is the 182nd warrior of the 77th class of Claymores who has never once used her Yoma powers, maintaining the untarnished face of a doll while slaying. The most powerful woman amongst the Claymores, Teresa of the faint smile. She arrives at town, killing a Yoma instantly, then another and another, finally a fourth. A couple more Yoma exit their disguises and are berated for their lack of tactics before being easily cut down. The civilians are rightfully terrified, at first believing that Teresa was wantonly mowing through humans. She scolds them for letting so many Yoma into town, counting the corpses of those she slew, and finding only 6 of the 7 she sensed. She teases the last one with these words, then slices it in half. The girl being used as a shield doesn't seem to even notice. Later that night, Teresa tries to participate in sleepy times like a human would, but fails to do so. Anyway, the next day, the plebs get the scoop on payment, and the girl from yesterday clings to Teresa. She is tossed onto the floor and berated for being pathetic, though. Teresa's assumptions about her were partly incorrect, as the girl arrived in town with the Yoma instead of being a denizen already. She was likely used as their toy, whatever sinister thing that implies, which explains the resolute silence. Regardless, Teresa has no patience for clingers and repeatedly kicks the girl away. The villagers believe that the little lady will be killed if she continues. She does continue and isn't killed, but might be quite injured. Later that night, Teresa is followed, but expresses that she doesn't appreciate this, stating plainly that the girl's attachment is an annoyance. Suddenly, bandits. After separating one of them from their hand, Teresa declares that robbing a Claymore is silly. The leader seems keen on persisting, riling up his men with rumors that Claymores are forbidden from killing humans, regardless of the circumstances. If they defy this law, they're executed by their organization. Teresa giggles in delight, then shows them her titties. This makes them vomit and flee, though. She attempts to tell her follower off as well, but fails to shake her. Nevertheless, the girl is still human, and begins to feel exhausted. Seeing this, Teresa jumps off a cliff. The girl is like, yeah, that's a good idea. Then face plants. I guess that's one way to ditch her. Teresa isn't altogether cold-hearted and resuscitates the kid by tossing her into a puddle. She gets cleaned up and has a mega apple snack, of which she proffers to Texas. Claymores don't eat much though. Teresa figures that she'll just drop the girl off at the next town and tells her to get some sleep. The next day, Teresa catches breakfast and complains about humanity's needs. She is rewarded with a hug and catches herself smiling. The handless fella is frothing in the woods to incite foreshadowing, probably. Meanwhile, Teresa saves her child from perishing in the wilderness and berates her for sleeping so heavily. She inwardly ponders the girl's misfortune at having a Claymore as her singular guardian. If only she would have picked a normal person instead. The following morning, Teresa inquires on a name, but the silence is deafening as the girl tries to speak. As she probably can't form any utterance at this juncture, Teresa takes it upon herself to name her Clare. Clare is elated, and Teresa explains that Clare is the name of one of the twin goddesses of love, the other being Teresa. This is quite ironic, considering the paths that they have tread in life so far, and the unlikely pairing continues their journey. The frother has emerged. Clare and Teresa arrive near a town destined to be Clarp's new home, and later that night, she falls asleep with eyes still dewed with tears. Claude may be depresso now, but she'll be much happier living normally. Teresa senses the bandit and lures him out into the darkness, scolding him for not tending his wound properly. She warns him that she'll rightfully fight back if attacked, but he just wishes to defile. Teresa doesn't really care and lets him do whatever. Clare suddenly attacks from stealth, which leads to her being stomped on briefly. The pizza draws a blade, ready to begin slaying, regardless of the organization's rules about killing humans. Teresa doesn't give a hoot nor a holler, and states that Claymores are still given free will. This spooks the cretin, who flees back into the woods. Clare has big feelings, and manages to squeak out the words to express her concern. She states that Teresa's loneliness and pain is buried deep, much like in herself. Clare could no longer suffer seeing her homie's misery and clings tightly. Teresa realizes that she was the one being comforted, not Clare, that despite her diminutive size, the little girl sacrificed what life she had left to simply bring relief to another who shares the same anguish. The next day, Clare gets a new fit, and another Yoma is felled. Upon receiving her reward, Teresa additionally requests that the town find a place for Clare. This causes her to strip naked and declare that she needs nothing but Teresa. This is absurd, of course, and Teresa gently turns her down. Humans must live amongst humans after all, and Clare immediately obtains a mother. Later, the official parting is sweet sorrow, but a necessity nonetheless. Anyway, Teresa finds that the bandit troop from before were targeting in the town she just departed from, and somehow takes flight. She beats herself up internally for not realizing that the Yoma she killed was probably a deterrent for the criminals. Unfortunately, despite being able to fly, she doesn't make it in time, finding the village completely ablaze. This freak still hasn't perished from his crippling infection and tracked Clare to an alleyway. Meanwhile, Teresa encounters the captain, who is smug about his pillaging. Teresa spots Clare being dragged off to be defiled and is taunted further. She deprives him of his other hand and cleaves him in twain, damning their existence as being lower than Yoma. This strikes fear in the bandits, except the leader, who is confident in his sword skills. He attacks, but is ultimately just slightly less pathetic than a regular person. The others, seeing their boss so swiftly slain, begin to regret their actions and flee. Clare is saved, but the blood shed in town won't disappear quietly. There are no exceptions to the rules, and the organization formed a hit squad to whack Teresa. Everyone, including her, agrees that going nuts was rather unexpected, and she uses her final words to ask about Clare's future. She gets no response, says farewell, and fells everyone in one strike. Orsay is shook. Teresa reassures the Claymores that they will survive, and declares that she isn't ready to die yet. Shorzy questions her defiance, but Teresa resolutely states that she found a reason to live on. The handler is peeved, giving the order to gather numbers 2 through 5 to pursue Teresa, and that's the end of part 1 of Claymore. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe, or a combination of those. If you have especially fallen for my wiles, I have a Patreon where you can hand feed me. Thanks again.